This is Justin Case of American Newscape, joining our friend and all things bees, Cricket Aldridge. We are here today to talk about bees. Greetings, Cricket. Welcome to American Newscape.
Hello, Justin.
Hey, let's not waste any time. I'm excited about this interview. Let please get us started. What's happening in your world?
Well, my world consists of bees, and that means bee removals. It means managing bees at my home, at my apiary, at Butterfly Wonderland in Scottsdale. Also helping the Science Center develop a beekeeping program, um, and then processing all the bee stuff I get. So that's what's happening.
Well, that's really a lot of responsibility when you stop to think about it. And you're helping get you're creating new beekeepers too. And in your work, you're actually trying to encourage people to become even hobbyist beekeepers, correct?
Yes, yes.
So, I've followed you for a long time. It's fascinating what you do. I've learned so much about bees. We're kind of centered in the bee capital of the United States, where two of the largest bee processor keepers and honey processors are. But it was
Mm-hmm.
until you started publicly posting stuff that I really started learning about requeening, swarms, just on down the line. And
Yes.
and I actually experienced a swarm, which was a little disconcerting to me because I am allergic to bees, not horrifically allergic, but moderately allergic, and I didn't know what to do. So I called the local bee person and they said, well, we could get out there, in a week or so. Then I called a couple friends of mine that are commercial beekeepers, and they shared the honest information with me. There's so much
Mm-hmm.
misinformation. And what they told me was in taking a picture of the swarm, that they would most probably leave. And they could tell me approximately when they were going to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I nervously walked by them, and just about the time they said they were going to leave, there wasn't a sign. There was like one bee left behind that forgot, didn't see the memo, didn't get out of Dodge.
Yeah, there's always the unicorn.
So
Yeah.
that's why I'm excited about this. I want you to kind of walk us through when you're doing bee removal, and the importance of bee removal to
Mm-hmm.
give us a better understanding of what goes on.
Okay. So, do you want me to just dive into bee removals?
I want you to just be cricket as you would be cricket. So
All
uh,
right.
just take us away. Take us on your
Well,
path.
why don't I give you a little history of me and bees? So, I've only been doing beekeeping for about 5 years, a little bit more. And I actually got into beekeeping because I wanted to make mead. I don't know if you've ever had that, but it's delicious fermented honey wine that the Vikings are famous for drinking. And anyway, I wanted bees to make honey for that. And at the time I wanted them, I just, I dive into stuff. So I went to a beekeeping meeting here in Phoenix and it was so disappointing. Their bees were, I mean, not the bees, but the people just were kind of a lot of old timers who didn't really, they just were really socializing with themselves. And I'm like, well, where do I even get bees? How do I start? And so they finally gave me the number of a guy who does bee removals. And he said, his name is Roy Arnold. He became my mentor. And he said, I can get you some bees. It's going to be $100 or something. And I asked if I could go with him. So we went to the first bee removal I'd ever gone to, opened up the wall, and there were no bees. So I was a little disappointed. And later on, he did get me a 5 pound bucket or a 5 gallon bucket of bees. And that's how I started. And from that point, I just asked if I could come with him to do bee removals. And for the next 2 years, that's what I did. I just helped him do bee removals. And let me tell you, Arizona has really mean bees.
Yeah.
So in the 90s, this is what happened actually. In the 90s is when Africanized bees crossed the border and they started to be noticed in Arizona. Um, so they came to the Brazil on purpose by some Brazilian beekeepers who wanted to increase the honey production in Brazil. So they got some queens in Tanzania and brought them here. And so Africanized bees behavior is a little different than European bees. They're all Apis mellifera, but African bees kind of developed some different behaviors for survival, and so they weren't expecting that. And the queens escaped when they swarmed and started breeding all the way up South America, finally reaching Arizona in the 90s. So it took them 30, 40 years to get here. Anyway, at that time, there were a lot more beekeepers in Arizona because we had a lot of agricultural land, and beekeeping was easy. And slowly, as killer bees started to take over the area, beekeepers stopped keeping bees, and the cities got some different rules so that you couldn't keep bees because they're so dangerous. And so that's kind of where I jumped into the picture, where beekeeping kind of had started to fade a little bit. There were still commercial beekeepers, but um, the beekeepers weren't really growing here, and people were considering honeybees as pests. So if you look, there are so many pest control companies here, and they all list that they take care of bees. And so I'm like, wait a second, bees are not pests, right? We need bees, especially with the colony collapse disorder and pesticides and the smaller agricultural land that we have. We really got to take care of them, and people are starting to realize that bees are important for our survival. And so we're really working on getting the idea that bees are pests out of the picture, because they're not pests. They are valuable creatures that need to be saved. And that's what our big message is in our group, Arizona Backyard Beekeepers. And we're really actually making a difference with that. People are starting to call beekeepers rather than exterminators, because really people want to save bees when they realize how important they are. So, social media and the news is really getting the word out that bees are vital for our survival. And so people are choosing more than they used to call beekeepers rather than exterminators. And I'm really grateful for that.
Well, let me interject. It's a social responsibility of ours.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the idea of killing a hive of bees because you don't want them on your property because you're too frugal or too cheap to have them properly removed and kept in society. I mean, because bees are actually a part of our society and an important part of our society.
Absolutely.
So that's
Yeah,
enough of me on
the
my soapbox.
I've got a soapbox too. So
Okay.
bees, seriously, I love doing bee removals, partly because people that choose to save bees are really awesome people, and they're so interested when they get to see what I'm doing. When I open up a wall or pull up that valve box lid and they get to see, because I always take pictures so I can show them. They're not always willing to stand out there, and I don't recommend it either. But when I show them what those bees have built inside their wall, one, they're terrified, and two, they're fascinated, and three, they just want to know everything they can about bees. They just see, like, what? Something built that in my home, and I get to tell them all about bees. I get to tell them where I'm going to take them. These bees are going to start producing honey. I'm going to give them a new queen. They're not going to be Africanized anymore. They're going to continue to thrive and be part of our world, and you played a big part in saving them, and people feel so good when they get to do that. And I just love it. People really don't know that much about bees, and I could of course talk all day about them, and sometimes they love it and sometimes they don't. But pretty much every time I leave a removal, the people are well educated about bees.
Whether they wanted to be or not.
Happily. I say happily.
Well,
Yeah, it's fun, and I like to leave them some pieces of comb or honeycomb if there's any available. Just, they're like, oh, my grandchildren would love to see this. And so I just feel like each removal I do, I'm helping give bees a better reputation. And then even when grandparents give their grandchildren things, combs, and get to tell them what happened and get to show them the pictures, and then they show their neighbors. It really, seriously, I've been doing this for 5 years, and it went from like no conversation about removals to people sharing all over. Don't call an exterminator. I have a friend who does bees. It just makes my heart so happy to see that happening.
Well, it's remarkable work. You're in a previous life had a home in Paradise Valley that was it was the epicenter of the bees, and every other year they would come bore a hole through a rafter to get into the crawl space of the ceiling. And once we heard the house buzzing, we knew we had another bee infestation.
Mm,
But it wasn't dangerous for us, and
yeah.
it got handled. And then every other year they would show back up because of the remnant honey, I assume.
Hmm.
Is that what drew them there?
Yeah, once there's been bees, the chances of getting bees there again is really high because there's that smell of beeswax and honey. So, we try to scrape it as much as we can when we do a removal. And why we actually tell people, don't just call an exterminator to spray, because all that honeycomb is still in your wall or ceiling, and it might drip down and cause damage, but it definitely will be calling other bees there. So yeah, it does. Bees, they do everything by scent. By scent and then with the sunlight, but um, they talk to each other with pheromones. Smell is strongly important to them. So they can smell it and you can't, but it's going to say, hey guys, some other bees had a home here. It's a good spot.
It's a good spot. Yeah, we like it here, and we're coming. Well, that's good business for the exterminators. Why
Yeah,
would they not want the bees coming back to a customer's house?
right. Yes. I did an experiment once for a blog post because I wanted to see what people, when they call an exterminator, what information do they get? So I had a scenario in my mind. I had bees. I wanted to act really dumb, like I've got bees in my wall, and they're going through the little hole thing by my hose, and I think they're going in. I think there are bees. What can you do? So I called several exterminators in the valley just to see what information they would give me, and how much they charge for doing that. And it was crazy the things that I learned from that. Some were like, oh, they're, Africanized bees, you have to kill them. You can't save those. They're terrible and dangerous. And it's going to be, I'll come and spray them for $150, but you probably have to get the comb out. It's going to be another $1,100 for me to do that. Or one lady she's like, what kind of bees are they? I'm like, well, they're what do you mean, what kind of bees? She's like, are they hornets? Are they yellow jackets? I'm like, what? They're bees. It was so funny. And another one said, yeah, I'll save the bees. And I learned later that they will say they save the bees, and they'll come out, and from talking with other people who've used this particular company, they absolutely do not save the bees. And so there's a lot of weird stuff in that community. I have some exterminators, however, who I know and call me. They don't like killing bees either, and some of them have become beekeepers. Some of them just call me when they get bees, and I'll come out and do the removals. So it just depends what's going on. But yeah, it's exterminators and beekeepers don't see eye to eye generally, and um, people are starting to see that. So I'm happy.
Well, there's a lot of it, and I'll say there's some exterminators. So I don't want to put all the exterminators in the same category, but
For sure.
they create as much sensationalism and fear as possible to
Yes.
assure that they get that work.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
it's surprising the government hasn't cracked down on them. I mean, we'll set up a sting for used car dealers.
Mm,
Why not these clowns?
right? Right? And the news is the worst. Every year they'll have sensational stories about someone getting stung by Africanized bees, and it's just this big story, and then we just laugh sometimes because they're so often wrong about their description. And the fire department will come out and they just foam the whole place, and they don't really like doing that either. So, yeah, there should be some more oversight in that area, I would say.
Or any.
Es- right. Well, especially I think people are just starting to get the idea that bees are really important. They're not pests. Bees contribute to our life. And, Africanized bees are different. They do create more colonies than Europeanized
Yes.
European bees. Their behaviors are pretty different, which is why they're thriving here. And we say at least 95% of the bees, the wild bees in Arizona, that are honeybees, are Africanized, um, because of their mating behaviors, their swarming behaviors. They swarm, which a swarm means the colonies reach a capacity in their hive that they need to um, they need more space. So they create a new queen, and that queen stays. And before she hatches, the old queen will leave with sometimes half the colony to go colonize, which is what happened in your situation. There was that swarm on your house.
Hmm.
And so those bees were just going to colonize a new place. And so European bees will do that sometimes 2 times a year, and Africanized bees can do it like 8 to 10 times a year.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and they will do. They have some funny behaviors, not funny, but they will go in a swarm this big, one queen and 100 or a couple hundred bees with her, and they'll actually take over another colony. And that's one way they do it, and one thing that makes beekeeping kind of hard in areas that have Africanized bees, because those bees not only will mate with any new queens that we produce to make our hives Africanized, but they will also come and take over a non-Africanized hive. So um, those are things we deal with, and probably why people think they're pests, but they are definitely not pests.
No, we see swarms all the time here, and generally the beekeepers come and get them, so that's a good thing.
Yeah,
And we have lots of beekeepers, and what's encouraging is you and your groups are creating new beekeepers.
mm-hmm.
And for anybody that wants to know what we're talking about, this is work intensive. I mean, if you go to Cricket's social media, she'll actually walk you through a process, and it may be a 2 or 3 day process of
Mm-hmm.
reclaiming a hive of bees. And when we see your passion for doing this and your passion for sharing the information, it's actually really cool. And when I talk about, I've learned more from you about bees than anybody else over the course of my years. I think it's a testament of what you're doing. So you're reaching people.
Yay. Yay, that makes me so happy. Totally, I'm so passionate about bees. They're amazing creatures. Really, the more you know, the more you want to know, and the more there is to know. So, my goal really is to do exactly what you said happened with you. I'm so happy that um, showing you guys, how crazy cool they are and why they're worth saving, and that you can save them. A lot of people don't even know you can save them. So that's kind of fun. But I do, like you said, it is a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. I have been stung hundreds of times. I used to swell up a lot, but I don't really anymore.
And we could hardly notice the twitch.
Hey, it's called bee sting therapy.
Yeah, exactly.
They say beekeepers don't have arthritis because they get stung, and actually I've had some people contact me. Their doctor said that their medicine was to be stung by bees. So I'm happy to go sting somebody. Well, actually, I'm not that happy to do it.
No, we want you to donate blood to us.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
the
okay.
bees are cool.
Well, let's talk about the one thing that I was so excited about is this requeening process, which is actually intensive bee therapy, and
Hmm.
the effect that it has on reclaiming these bees. I think it's
Hmm.
fascinating.
It is, and it's vital, because our group is called Arizona Backyard Beekeepers, and there's a lot of beekeepers who aren't backyard. They have their bees are on farms or they do commercial beekeeping, and it's not as essential because it does cost to requeen here in Arizona. If you lived in Minnesota or Washington, even Northern California, it's not as necessary to do this. But what happens is when we get an Africanized colony, um, you can't have an Africanized colony and live in an urban setting. It's just not safe. Africanized bees can live um, fine in your wall or something, and you might not notice them. However, beekeeping puts those bees in a unnatural environment, and we're required to inspect our colonies regularly. Regularly meaning every other week, so twice a month. And when you do that with an Africanized colony, they get really angry. It's not safe for your neighbors if you have an Africanized colony. So it's vital that you requeen it. And so what that means is we order queens from places like Hawaii, Northern California, um, sometimes Virginia, places that don't have Africanized bees, because you can do this because the queen in a colony only mates once in her whole life. So that queen hatches, and after a day or so, she'll go out and fly. She'll fly, who knows where. It's to a drone congregation area. So drones are male bees, and they are made up 100% from the queen because they come from unfertilized eggs, which is fascinating to me. So this queen will lay unfertilized eggs. They become male bees. So those male bees in that hive cannot mate with their mother. The offspring won't survive. So that queen goes out and flies, and she releases a pheromone in an area way up in the sky. Um, and all the drones at a certain time of day will go to that. They'll go in these areas, and they'll just fly around waiting until the queens come by, and the queens release that pheromone, and the drones will be drawn to them, and they will attach themselves to the queen and mate with her. And when the drones finish mating, they die, and another drone comes up to eight to even 20 drones I've heard can mate with a queen, and that's preferable. The more is better, because that queen's only mating that one time in her life. And so she has to have enough sperm stored for the years that she's going to be laying eggs. And she can live 3 to 5 years. So
Wow.
that one mating needs to get her through those years of laying, 12 to 1,500 eggs a day, which is incredible. So the best thing would be for her to mate with drones from multiple colonies, right? It's genetic diversity. It it makes the hive stronger. And so in Arizona, where there's Africanized bees, the drones are going to be primarily Africanized. And Africanized drones mate for longer periods of the day. They'll go out and fly all day, whereas European drones typically are more afternoon. And they
They,
fly faster. What was
I,
that?
I was going to say they sleep in. These
Yeah.
These
Yeah, I
French
know that you're
bees
like,
like to sleep in.
yeah, I know. They're a little lazier. True to their roots.
Yeah.
Not
Okay.
just kidding. I tell it to my Italian exchange student.
Okay.
Um, but so those drones will Africanized bees will fly faster. They mate longer. It's just there's no chance for your queen to get mated by a drone that's not Africanized if you're in these areas. So we have to buy queens from places that don't have them. And so when our group does that, the queens cost about $30 to $40 a piece to get if you're doing a group purchase, because the shipping, of course, it's got to be overnight, can be a lot. So as a group, it's awesome, but we do have to requeen pretty often, usually at least once a year. Um, or if our hives become Africanized, we have to, requeen each time that happens, and queens are not always available. But that process is vital for backyard beekeeping. And you can turn that Africanized colony that was horrible and mean, they're not all horrible and mean, some are. But even the meanest colony we call it rehabilitated, but really they're just changing the genetics of that colony. Because what happens is we get a queen, and we have to introduce her a little differently to the Africanized colony, because Africanized bees do not like to accept a non-Africanized queen. European bees have no problem.
Being lazy.
So yeah, right? They're like, oh, whatever.
Yeah.
She lay eggs,
Yeah.
whatever. So we use these push-in cages that we make. They're just wire cages that are about this big. And we put the queen on a brood frame. So a brood frame is comb that has pupating bees in it. So we don't want it absolutely full, but partially. So we press that in, and the queen can immediately start laying eggs in the empty cells, which releases a pheromone that helps her be accepted. But before you do that, I need to say you have to remove the original queen, because they will never accept a queen if the original queen is there. So finding her, taking her out is important. So when we put her in the new queen in the cage, she has a dot on her that is essential here, because you need to make sure that the queen you put in your colony is marked. The queen that you have in there stays in there. So if you did not have a mark on your queen, you wouldn't know if you had a new queen. If they made a new queen, or a new queen came in and took over. But if it's got that paint dot on it, that's your queen. She's not Africanized. Is this making sense at all?
Well, I think it is, Cricket. It made sense to me initially when I saw it. So you bring in essence, the queen that comes in, the queen that you guys have to purchase and fly in first class from Hawaii or Virginia, wherever it's coming
Yes.
from, brings the brings the temperament to the hive once that hive accepts her. Correct?
Well, not quite. She's That hive is going to be Africanized. Its behavior is not going to change until what actually happens is that queen is accepted. After about a week, you can take that cage off her, and she will be accepted. You can watch and see how they treat her. Make sure they're not trying to kill her. And what happens is that queen that's laying, 1,500 eggs a day, the bees that are in there are caring for her young, caring for those new larvae, those new pupa, and so they're actually being replaced. So it takes about 2 to 3 months for your colony to become non-Africanized. That meaning it's actually becoming Europeanized.
Okay.
So the bees live 6 weeks. So you've got the eggs that the African queen laid. Okay, those take 23 days to hatch, 21 to 23 days to hatch, or to emerge. And then they have 6 weeks to live. So this process of them just, the older bees dying, the newer bees coming up, the new bees that the queen has laid hatching to take over. So it does take about 2 to 3 months for that process to happen. So that's really how the behavior changes. Her European um, behavior isn't really affecting them. It's really her offspring that are changing
Okay.
and making that hive become non-Africanized.
So it's a transformation in genetics.
Yes. Yes, it's really replacing that colony. But the old colony is caring for the new one as it's growing.
I wonder, she must, when she comes into this group of Africanized bees, she must go, boy, these bees are serious.
Right. She's like, what the heck? I was in Hawaii
Yeah,
drinking pina coladas.
right. Now I'm in Glendale, Arizona. It's 120 degrees. And that's another thing, Cricket
Mm-hmm.
realized
Mm-hmm.
Cricket's doing bee extractions when in a bee suit when it's 110 degrees
Yes.
outside.
Thank you. I get kudos for that, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's, I don't, these Minnesota beekeepers have nothing on you. They may think it's rough up there in old Minnesota in the wintertime trying to keep their bees alive, but
Right?
let them come extract some bees in August in Phoenix.
I know. I keep telling people, if your house was made out of wax, would you choose Arizona to live in?
Well, that's why
So the
they're,
bees struggle. The
you
bees
know,
struggle. And when I do removals, I actually ask people if I can dunk my bee suit in their pool before
uh,
I put it on.
having grown up in Scottsdale Paradise Valley, I remember back when Killer Bees were Saturday Night Live comedy, and this was before they
Mm,
showed up, but back then, there was a bee that was in what they called the Fort McDowell bees, and anybody that went out there, they would get quite commonly get massively stung by those bees. And
mm.
they would say, "Why is that?" I'd say, "Well, they're not happy living in the desert, particularly at Fort McDowell."
Particularly there. Bad attitudes.
Bad attitudes, bad
Yep.
attitudes.
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean, honestly, think about Africanized bees, they're survivalists. So they come from a pretty harsh environment where I don't know if you've seen how they keep bees in Africa traditionally, but often it's in these basket tubes that they build and hang in trees. And when they want to harvest the honey, they basically rip it all up, and so often kill the bees to do that. So they've got the beekeepers who are not who are destroying them. They've got the animals that are constantly trying to kill them, and so they are survivalists. They've got the weather just like we have here. So I always tell people Africanized bees are good for bees because they alone could probably help support uh, the world's beekeeping population because of their amazing survival behavior. But they're terrible for beekeepers.
well, they're a challenge, and
They're difficult to, it makes people not want to be beekeepers when they get stung all the time, or it makes people afraid of bees, so they want to kill them. And that's why we're trying to change that. Some Africanized bees actually are starting to be mellower. You can't really tell the difference between an Africanized bee and a European bee if you were just to look at them. They look identical. So it really is just their behavior. And um, there's some that are super super mean, and there's some that are just mildly mean.
some that are pussycats, like from France. Lazy.
Yes.
Do they even make honey? Those
Yeah.
European bees? They
Oh my
must.
gosh. They all make just the same amount of honey, I think. Well, there's different breeds that make honey better in different environments, which is why they brought those over from Tanzania, because Brazil's hot and humid, and Apis mellifera comes from temperate climates. And so they weren't doing as well here, which is why Africanized bees do super well here. But my very favorite bees are Cordovan. They are like Winnie the Pooh bees. They're fluffy and yellow, and you don't have to wear a suit, and they're just lazy. They do bring in honey, but oh my gosh, they're such little. Yeah, I
They're
love
more
them.
they're more lovers than workers, I assume.
Well, they're pretty good workers, depending, but they are slow to start. But yeah, so that's the neat thing about keeping bees. I can order a Cordovan queen from someplace that's been mated with Cordovan drones, and I can take that and my colony will become Cordovan. So that's kind of a fun thing you can do. And maybe the next year you want to have carniolan bees. They're almost black and all apis mellifera, but different characteristics.
How cool is that? Well, Cricket, I
Oh
could
no,
talk to
bees
you
are
all.
amazing.
I could talk to you all day,
Yeah.
but you posted something that I was very excited about. You've come up with what I believe is the perfect holiday gift, and if they don't get one of these this year, they should put an order in now to get one for next year. And
Yes.
and that's what you're doing with these combs, and I think it's really cool. I'm going to start saving my pennies so I can put a giant one on my office wall.
Awesome. Thank you for
Well, why don't you
bringing that up.
do you have one of them here to show or
I do. Well, let me show you. So since I do a lot of removals, I get this beautiful, beautiful comb out of walls and floors, and oftentimes it will have honey in it, which I can feed back to the bees. But other times it's just beautiful, and I just save it because it's so pretty. So I've been collecting some pieces like this. This is drone comb. It's larger cell size and it's really pale, so it means it's kind of new comb and pretty fragile, as opposed to something like this, which look how it's not flat. It's just the way the bees have built it, and it was probably yeah, it was hanging like this, and you can see the pollen in it. Different pollens that the bees have been collecting. If you hold it up to a window, it'd be like a stained glass window, super beautiful. So anyway, I'm like, what can I do to, I just want to show this to people, and people can appreciate how amazing these structures are. So I thought I would make these little um, kind of shadow box displays with comb in it. So people can, well, it's hard to see with the glare, but
no, it's cool.
people can hang this on their wall and really just, this is a piece of nature, the most perfect structure. And the darker parts of the comb is the propolis. So the older the comb gets, every time a bee hatches and emerges, the housekeeping bees will go in and line that with propolis. And propolis is a product the bees make from tree resin, and it's antimicrobial, antifungal. It makes their comb extremely healthy, and in fact they're starting to call propolis the bees' external immune system, and it's actually quite good for us as well. But my point was that is what happens with this comb that is darker. Here's a different one. um, it has, the bees have propolized it, that's what we call it. It makes it really strong. You can't tell.
No, I can.
That's funny. Anyway, that's just, there's so many different shapes. So that's what I've been kind of doing lately. So like this comb is really, really strong. And that's from the propolis. The lighter one I showed you is a lot more fragile, but you can put these in your house, put it on your desk, on your wall, and just appreciate this beautiful creation. And I love sharing that. And I'm glad that I can actually do something with this comb that I get to remove from homes.
Well, everybody that pretends to love bees and believes in the importance of bees should have one of these on their wall because that in itself can be an ambassador for these bees.
Totally. And actually, you know what? There's a new meadery opening up in Carefree, and they just ordered a bunch of these to hang on their wall. So I'm pretty excited about that because it's combining my loves, mead and bees,
Mead.
which is already combined. But you guys, mead is really yummy.
Mead is an acquired taste, everybody.
Well, come on. There's different meads. There's dry meads, sweet meads, sour meeds. I
Right.
bet you could find one you like.
Right. Well, maybe. Yeah, probably with enough. If you invest enough time, and I'll share this was a long, long time ago. I was in search of the Smothers Brothers winery,
I didn't
and
know there was one.
well, there was one, and lo and behold, we were fogged in and driving blindly, and went around the corner, and there it was. And I went in that winery and I was very excited because I assumed I could purchase a bottle of wine that had the Brothers logo on it. But no,
Mm-hmm.
that was not the case. And we started tasting those wines. And the young lady that was helping us, she asked me what I thought of these wines. And and all the while there was this almost like a prospector, a very peculiar prospector, and his name, he went by the name of Taz because he fashioned himself as the Tasmanian devil. And he was like rummaging around like a man will do, totally lost, couldn't find what he was looking for. And she goes, well, I'd really like to know what you think of it. And I said, well, it's swill.
Oh,
And she goes, well, what do you mean? And
is that a good thing?
the prospector Taz was like really laughing. And he goes, you don't know what swill means? And she said, no. And he explained to her what it meant. He said, it's putrid. And he's right. This wine is putrid. He goes, let you sample some of my wine because they shared the winery or the tasting room.
Ah.
Now, Taz may have been insane like me, but he was one of the most acclaimed grape mixers there was. You know, Merlot is a mix. This guy did sophisticated mixes for the fancy San Francisco restaurants. And his wine was like unbelievable. I mean, unbelievable. Hopefully Taz is still kicking around up there. But I promise you, if he is, he's blending some of the most amazing wine, and he would talk to you about the science. And I'm sure there must be good mead somewhere. I've just never had any, but
Yeah, there is. There's really good mead. Next time you come up here, I will show you the best.
You'll take me meeting. Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
Cricket, thank you. We'd like you to promise to come back. I think there's so much more you can talk about. I think our fans are going to love you, and they're going to love what you're doing. I think it's very important work. A lot of us will spend the day and not accomplish what you do in the morning.
Well, I hope everyone loves bees and looks more into saving them, and I will feel super happy if that happens.
Well, if we pick up one or two, that'll be a good day too. So,
Yes.
that being said, this has been Justin Case and Cricket Aldridge, diving into all things bees. Thanks for joining us. Please remember additional information, all of Cricket's links, how to find her cool framed honeycomb stuff, and her honey products, and learn more about what all these people are doing. And we didn't even talk about the Arizona Honey Festival, which we should one of these days, but we're not going to today. It's going to be something that everybody needs to put on their bucket list. Get to this honey festival and bring lots of money so everybody can be happy. Okay, so those links are provided. Please consider connecting with Cricket, following her, and subscribing to this channel.